I never imagined the people I loved most would try to destroy my family's name. They framed my husband for a crime he didn't commit, dragged our reputation through the mud, and smiled while doing it. But they forgot one thing. When you hurt a woman like me, I don't cry. I rebuild and I destroy quietly. My name is Margaret Whitmore. I'm 65 years old, and for most of my life, I believed I had it all: a loving husband, a successful family business, and a son I was fiercely proud of. Our home sat high above the coast, a sprawling estate wrapped in marble and silence, where even the wind seemed to carry dignity. But I've learned that behind the grandest walls, secrets grow like mold. My husband, Edward, was a man of unwavering integrity. People trusted him: banks, charities, neighbors. He was the kind of man whose word could seal a deal stronger than any contract. For 40 years, he built our name into something respectable. And then, in one brutal moment, they tore it all away. It started quietly: a missing signature here, a misplaced document there, small things that didn't make sense but didn't seem catastrophic. Edward brushed them off, blaming age, overwork, or stress. But then the whispers started. Fraud, embezzlement, corruption. Words so heavy they cracked our world open. When the authorities came, they didn't come quietly. Sirens howled through our gates at dawn. Men in dark suits tore through our home, our offices, our files. I watched my husband, my proud, dignified Edward, handcuffed like a criminal, his face pale and stunned. My son David stood beside his wife Olivia, looking equally shocked. Or so I thought. Olivia had been in our family for 7 years. From the day I met her, I saw the sparkle in her eyes, not of affection but of ambition. She was stunning, poised, and knew how to make people like her. I wanted to believe she loved my son. I wanted to believe she fit into our world. But deep down, something about her smile always felt calculated. In the days after Edward's arrest, Olivia was everywhere. She managed the press, handled the lawyers, comforted David, and told me to rest. "You need to take care of yourself, Mother," she'd say softly, her hand brushing mine as if I were fragile. "We'll handle everything." But I saw how she looked at me when she thought I wasn't watching. The pity, the triumph, the quiet satisfaction. Edward's case moved fast. Evidence piled up against him: bank transfers, altered ledgers, falsified documents. It looked airtight. Our lawyers said the paper trail was impossible to dispute. But I knew my husband. Edward wouldn't even move a dollar without justification. Something was wrong. And then, one night, while everyone slept, I found it. I had gone to the study, desperate to feel Edward's presence. His desk still smelled faintly of cedar and cologne. I ran my hand along the polished wood and noticed something. An envelope tucked beneath the drawer lining. Inside were copies of financial statements. They didn't belong to Edward's account. They were Olivia's. The numbers were staggering. Transfers that matched the supposed fraudulent amounts Edward was accused of. And the timestamps, they were logged under her digital signature. She had used her position in the company to access his credentials, reroute funds, and fabricate evidence. My son's wife had framed my husband. I sat there for a long time, the papers trembling in my hands. My heart felt like it had stopped beating. Then came the realization, the horror, that my son might know. Because there, buried in one of the files, was a text message between Olivia and David: "Once he's out of the way, everything's ours." I couldn't breathe. My hands shook. My vision blurred. My own son, the boy I carried, protected, adored, had turned against his father for money. In that moment, something inside me died. But something else was born, cold, deliberate, unstoppable. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply closed the folder, locked it in Edward's old briefcase, and made a promise to myself. They had taken everything from us: our name, our peace, our dignity. But I would take everything from them, piece by piece, until they begged for mercy. And mercy was not something I planned to give. You said, the next few weeks felt like living in 2 different worlds. By day, I played the part of the calm, gracious matriarch, the woman who smiled politely at neighbors, tended her roses, and hosted quiet dinners in her sunroom overlooking the bay. But when night fell, the real work began. My study became my war room. The mahogany desk was covered with folders, printouts, and notes written in my looping cursive. Every evening, under the soft glow of a brass lamp, I tracked the slow unraveling of the lie that had nearly destroyed my husband. Marina's investigation was a marvel of discipline. Each time she found another link in Olivia's forged chain, she would send me a single-line message: "Thread pulled." That was our code. She had now traced over 6 accounts tied to Olivia's shell companies. and every one of them connected back to the fraudulent transactions that had ruined Edward's name. The pattern was undeniable. But Olivia was starting to sense that something was wrong. She'd grown quieter in public appearances. The wide smiles were gone, replaced with tight expressions and carefully chosen words. I watched one of her interviews on television. When the reporter mentioned new leads in the financial investigation, a flicker crossed Olivia's face. Just for a second, but I saw it. It was fear. I poured myself a glass of wine and smiled. Fear was the first crack in her armor. David, meanwhile, was caught between shame and awakening. His visits to his father were more frequent now, and he had started cooperating with the prosecutor. I never told him that I knew. I wanted him to come to the truth on his own. He needed to understand that his silence had consequences, that loyalty without conscience was complicity. One afternoon, as we sat together in the conservatory, he said quietly, "Mom, I don't know how I didn't see it before. She controlled everything. Our money, my calendar, my friends. I thought she was protecting me." I looked at him, my son who had once been so confident, so sure of his place in the world. "You wanted to believe the woman you loved," I said softly. "That's not weakness, David. It's blindness. And blindness can be cured." He nodded, tears glimmering but not falling. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now," I said, "we wait for the truth to ripen, and then we harvest." That night, Marina called. "We have it," she said simply. "Everything. The emails, the metadata, the forged authorizations. There's even a recorded call. Olivia negotiating with a broker who helped her move funds offshore. She's done." My breath caught. I had imagined this moment for months, but hearing it was something else. "Are you certain?" I asked. "Absolutely. It's ironclad." When I hung up, I sat very still for a long time. Outside, the sea was black and smooth, the moonlight flickering across the surface like liquid silver. I whispered into the quiet, "It's time, Edward. It's finally time." The next morning, I called Judge Avery. "Lillian," I said, "it's ready. Everything." She didn't sound surprised. "I thought it might be," she replied. "I've already spoken to Rains. The grand jury will hear the evidence this week. And Margaret, prepare yourself. This will get ugly before it gets clean." "I'm ready for ugly," I said. "I've lived in it long enough." But there was one last piece I needed to move. Olivia still believed she held the narrative, that she could twist public opinion to her advantage. She was planning a charity gala that weekend, a benefit for children's education, of all things to polish her image further. The guest list was full of donors, politicians, and media figures. Perfect. I sent a short note to the event organizer, an old friend from my philanthropic circles. "I'd love to attend, dear. I think it's time I came back into the public eye." When I arrived that Saturday evening, the ballroom shimmered with chandeliers and laughter. My gown was deep burgundy velvet, rich, regal, deliberate. No cream, no blue. I wore my mother's diamond choker, a piece that caught every light in the room and threw it back tenfold. As I entered, conversations hushed for a moment. People turned, eyes widening. The disgraced Mrs. Whitmore back among the living. Olivia's smile froze when she saw me. "Margaret," she said, crossing the floor with practiced grace. "How wonderful to see you here." "Isn't it?" I replied smoothly, taking her hand and holding it a second too long. "You've done a lovely job. It almost looks honest." Her eyes flashed. "You're brave to show your face again." "Courage is a habit," I said. "Some of us never lose it." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Whatever you think you're doing, stop. You can't win this." I tilted my head. "I don't need to win. I just need the truth to breathe again." And as if on cue, the first murmurs began spreading through the room. Phones lit up. Screens glowed. The news had broken. District Attorney to present new evidence in Whitmore case. Possible charges against key witness. Olivia's name wasn't in the headline yet, but it was in the subtext, and the subtext was louder than any symphony. Her face drained of color. She excused herself, clutching her clutch bag so tightly her knuckles whitened. I watched her go, my glass of champagne untouched in my hand. Across the room, Lillian Avery nodded subtly at me from the corner, her expression one of quiet triumph. The plan had worked perfectly. I didn't gloat. I didn't toast. I simply walked out into the cool night, the wind lifting strands of my silver hair. For the first time in months, I felt air in my lungs that didn't taste of dread. When I got home, Edward called from the detention center. His voice was steady, his words simple. "I heard," he said. "Is it true?" "Yes," I whispered. It's over. Or soon will be. There was silence for a long moment, and then I heard the sound I'd been waiting for. The soft, trembling exhale of relief. Thank you, he said quietly, for not giving up on me. I smiled, tears finally breaking free. You were always worth fighting for. But as I hung up, I knew the fight wasn't done yet. Olivia would not go down quietly. She would claw, lie, and manipulate until the last possible moment. I was ready for that, because revenge, I'd learned, wasn't about rage. It was about endurance. And I had more of that than she ever would. The night before the charity gala, I stood in front of my mirror, fastening a string of diamonds around my neck. They once belonged to Edward's mother. Old, heavy stones that caught the light like fire. I hadn't worn them in years. But tonight I wanted to shine. Not for admiration, but for victory. The gala was Olivia's masterpiece. She'd taken charge of it entirely, relishing the spotlight as co-chair of the Whitmore Foundation. The press adored her elegance, her strength through hardship, her perfectly curated tragedy. Every camera loved her. She'd invited the city's elite, eager to remind everyone that the Whitmore name still stood tall. What she didn't know was that this night would be her undoing. I arrived fashionably late. The ballroom glittered beneath chandeliers, laughter floated like champagne bubbles. Olivia was radiant in emerald silk, her hair swept high, her smile dazzling. My son David stood beside her, his expression proud but cautious. When he saw me, he hesitated, guilt flashing in his eyes, gone as quickly as it came. Mother, Olivia greeted warmly, kissing my cheek. You look stunning. I'm so happy you came. Of course, dear, I replied smoothly. I wouldn't miss it for the world. For weeks, I'd been working quietly, feeding evidence to the right people. Edward's old lawyer, a trusted journalist, and one discreet federal investigator. But tonight wasn't just about paperwork. Tonight was about truth in the open, where everyone could see. Dinner began with speeches. Olivia stood at the podium speaking about legacy, integrity, family values, each word dripping with hypocrisy. I watched her, calm, unblinking. My pulse was steady, my mind razor-sharp, and then, at the height of her speech, the ballroom doors opened. 2 federal agents walked in. The crowd turned, murmuring in confusion. Olivia faltered, her smile flickering. David rose halfway from his chair. Mrs. Olivia Whitmore, one of the agents called. You're under arrest for corporate fraud, embezzlement, and obstruction of justice. The silence that followed was absolute. Olivia froze, microphone trembling in her hand. Then came the whispers, the gasps, the cameras flashing like lightning. She tried to compose herself, her voice shaking. There must be some mistake. But the agents were already beside her, reading her rights as they slipped the cuffs around her wrists. The sight was magnificent. Grace unraveling, arrogance dissolving under fluorescent light. David stood paralyzed, color draining from his face. This can't be happening, he stammered, rushing forward. There's been a misunderstanding. There's no misunderstanding, I said quietly, standing from my seat. The entire room turned toward me. My voice was calm, deliberate, cold. The evidence has been delivered to the authorities. Every falsified transaction, every forged signature, every message you both sent. His eyes widened. Yes, David. Me, for a moment, he just stared, disbelief written across his face. How could you? He whispered. How could I? I took a step closer, my gaze unwavering. How could you? You helped destroy your father's name, your family's honor for money. You stood by while he rotted in disgrace. The room was silent, every eye fixed on us. Olivia's sobs echoed faintly as she was led away, her perfect mask finally shattered. David sank into his chair, trembling. I didn't mean. She told me. Don't. I cut in sharply. Don't you dare pretend you didn't know what you were doing. You betrayed your own father. You chose greed over blood. He bowed his head, tears glistening. For the first time in years, I felt nothing for him. Not anger, not sorrow, just a vast, cold emptiness. The agents escorted Olivia out, cameras flashing wildly. The whispers turned into a storm, reporters scribbling, guests murmuring, reputations collapsing in real time. By the end of that night, the Whitmore scandal had a new face, and it wasn't Edward's. When I returned home, the house was quiet. Edward sat by the fireplace, his posture straight but his eyes tired. He looked up as I entered, confusion and hope mingling in his gaze. It's done, I said softly, setting the diamond necklace on the mantel. They arrested her tonight. The evidence is in federal hands. You'll be cleared within days. He stared at me for a long moment as if trying to understand. Then, slowly, he nodded. You did this. Yes, I whispered. For you, for us. He rose, walked toward me, and took my hands. For a brief moment the years melted away, the warmth of his touch, the quiet pride in his eyes. Margaret, he murmured, I don't know whether to thank you or fear you. Maybe both, I said with a faint smile. He laughed softly, but there was sadness in it. You've changed. I had to, I replied. You taught me that a Whitmore never bows. I just learned to fight differently. That night, as the city buzzed with news of Olivia's downfall, I stood by the window, watching the lights below. Revenge had a strange taste, sharp, satisfying, but laced with sorrow. I had won. But victory, I realized, doesn't always feel like peace. Still, I wasn't done. David had yet to face his reckoning, and I intended to deliver it myself. The morning after the gala, the world had changed. Olivia's face was plastered across every newspaper and news site. Her arrest caught on dozens of phones, her name dragged through headlines she once courted. Whitmore Harris arrested in fraud scandal. Family fortune built on lies. The fall of a high society couple. And though Edward's name was finally being cleared, I didn't celebrate. Not yet. There was one more person left to face. My son. David hadn't come home after the gala. His car was gone from the driveway. His phone switched off. I spent the day in silence, moving through the house like a ghost. Every room still held a memory of his childhood, his laughter in the kitchen, his drawings on the fridge, his little shoes by the door. I'd once believed that being a mother meant forgiving endlessly. But some betrayals carved too deep to forgive. It was evening when I finally heard the sound of tires crunching on the gravel. I didn't move. I knew he'd come here eventually. He had nowhere else left to go. David walked in through the front door without knocking. His face was pale, eyes red-rimmed, his designer suit wrinkled. He looked older somehow, broken, fragile. For a moment, I saw the boy he used to be, the one who'd run to me when he scraped his knees. Then I remembered the message he'd sent to Olivia, the one that damned him forever. Mother. His voice cracked. I didn't know where else to go. I didn't answer. I poured myself a cup of tea instead, the sound of liquid filling the silence between us. You've always known where home was, I said finally. You just forgot what it meant. He swallowed hard. You exposed her. Yes. And me. I turned to face him. You exposed yourself, David. I simply showed the world the truth. He sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. I thought I could control it. He whispered. Olivia said it was temporary, that once the transfer's settled, we'd move the money back. I didn't think it would go this far. Don't lie to me. My voice was sharp, cutting through his excuses. You didn't think it would cost you this much. That's what you mean. He looked up at me, eyes wet. I made a mistake, Mother. I was weak. No, I said coldly. You were greedy, you had everything. A name, a business, a future built by your father's hands, and you wanted more. You wanted it faster. Easier. He stood abruptly, pacing. You don't understand. You and Father had everything handed to you. You never had to fight for respect. I was always in his shadow, always the disappointment. I rose slowly, fury tightening my throat. Do you think your father's respect was a gift? He earned it, every contract, every sleepless night, every sacrifice, and you destroyed him because your ego couldn't stand in his light. He slammed his fist on the table, his voice rising. I lost everything too. The company's gone. Olivia's in jail. My name, ruined. You should have thought about that before you sold your soul. The silence that followed was heavy. I could see the rage fading from his face, replaced by exhaustion and regret. He looked like a man realizing too late what he'd thrown away. After a long pause, he whispered, What happens now? I took a breath. You'll turn yourself in. He froze. What? The investigators already have your name. They know you were complicit. I've given them everything. His eyes widened in disbelief. You turn me in? Wes? Mother. Please, you can't. I can. I said quietly, and I did. You think I fought this hard for justice just to let you walk away from it? He stared at me as if seeing a stranger. You'd send your own son to prison. I met his gaze without flinching. You sent your father there first. He sank to his knees, tears spilling freely. Please, Mother, I'm begging you. For a moment I almost broke. Almost. But mercy is a luxury for the innocent, and my son had long abandoned innocence. You'll serve your time, I said softly, "and maybe one day you'll understand what your father's name truly meant. Until then, you live with what you did." He lowered his head, sobbing quietly. I turned away, unable to watch. I went to the window, the same place I'd stood countless nights, staring at the world beyond the glass. "Do you hate me?" he asked behind me, voice trembling. I closed my eyes. "No, David, I pity you." When the officers arrived an hour later, he didn't resist. He walked out silently, head bowed, the same way Edward had months ago. But this time, I didn't cry. I stood in the doorway, the wind tugging at my hair, the fading light painting the sky gold. The pain was sharp, but underneath it was something else, peace. A hollow, quiet peace I hadn't felt in years. Edward appeared behind me, resting a gentle hand on my shoulder. "It's over," he murmured. "Yes," I said, watching the car disappear down the long drive. "It's over." He squeezed my hand, and for the first time in a long while, we simply stood there. Two survivors in a house finally free of lies. But even as the sun set over the horizon, I knew this was not just an ending. It was a rebirth. The Whitmore name would rise again, not through power or wealth, but through truth. And though revenge had carried me through the darkest nights, it was justice that finally set me free. The weeks after David's arrest passed in a strange silence. Reporters still called, old acquaintances still whispered, and society still gossiped. But none of it mattered anymore. For the first time in years, our house was quiet, untouched by deceit. The walls that had once echoed with tension now held a gentler kind of stillness. Edward was exonerated officially within 10 days. The investigators cleared his name completely, and his charges were dropped. I watched him the morning the news broke, how he sat by the window, holding the letter in trembling hands. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, quietly, he exhaled. "It's strange," he murmured, eyes glistening. "After everything, I thought I'd feel triumphant. But all I feel is tired?" I reached over and took his hand. "That's because you're a good man, Edward. Revenge is for people like me. Justice for people like you." He smiled faintly, the lines on his face deepening with age and survival. "You always did fight differently." "Someone had to," I said softly. The housekeeper came in later that morning, holding a small box. It was left at the front gate, ma'am. No return address. Inside was a letter, from David. The handwriting was shaky, uneven. He was writing from county jail, awaiting sentencing. "Mother, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I think about Father every day, about what I did, about the moment I lost myself. You were right. I let greed destroy me. But in here, for the first time, I see things clearly. I don't hate you for what you did. You were the only one brave enough to stop me. Tell Father I'm sorry. Tell him I remember everything he taught me. Maybe one day I'll earn the right to carry his name again. Love, David." I folded the letter carefully and set it in Edward's lap. He read it slowly, his eyes wet but calm. When he finished, he looked at me with quiet sadness. "He's still our son, less," I whispered. "But now he'll have to become a man first." Months passed. Edward returned to the company, not as a man hungry for power, but as one determined to rebuild integrity. We sold part of the estate, donated to the same charities that once turned their backs on us, and created a new trust in Edward's name for victims of financial fraud. It was poetic in its way, the Whitmore name, once tarnished by lies, now funding truth. As for me, I found myself changing too. The fire that once fueled my vengeance began to cool. I started painting again, something I hadn't done in decades. The first piece I finished was a portrait, not of Edward or David or even Olivia. It was of myself, not the younger version, flawless and composed, but the woman I had become, older, lined, strong. When I unveiled it to Edward, he smiled. "That's the real you," he said. I nodded. For a long time, I thought revenge would make me whole again. But it didn't. It just cleared the noise so I could finally hear myself. One spring afternoon, we visited the family mausoleum together. The marble was cool beneath my fingertips as I placed fresh white lilies inside. It wasn't a grave visit. It was symbolic, a farewell to everything we'd lost. To the illusions, to the pain, to the people we'd been before it all began. As I stood there, the sunlight spilled through the trees, scattering gold across the marble. I closed my eyes and let it warm my face. I thought of Olivia somewhere behind bars, probably still scheming, still convinced she was the victim. I thought of David rebuilding himself one painful day at a time. And I thought of Edward, standing beside me, the man who had endured humiliation and loss yet still found the strength to forgive. Perhaps that was the final lesson. Revenge gives you control, but forgiveness gives you peace. That night I sat alone by the fire, a glass of red wine in my hand. The flames danced across the room, and I whispered to the quiet, "We survived." It wasn't triumph, it wasn't relief, it was something deeper: freedom. For years I defined myself by what was taken from me. Now, I was defined by what I refused to lose: my dignity, my love, my truth. When I finally went to bed, Edward was already asleep, the faint rise and fall of his chest steady against the dim light. I brushed a hand against his arm and smiled faintly. Tomorrow the world would move on. New scandals, new faces, new stories. But ours, our story, would remain etched in the quiet corners of that house, a reminder of what happens when deceit meets the wrong kind of woman. Because I am Margaret Whitmore, I have been betrayed, broken, and rebuilt. And though revenge was my weapon, truth became my legacy.